والسلام على رسول الله وعلى آله وصحبه ومن والاه ثم أما بعد. To proceed, inshallah, today we will have a bab or maqam al-Illham, the station of Illham or the station of inspiration. And in fiqh, inshallah, we will finish the chapter on riba, or usury, if you want to call it usury. We'll start with Bab al-Ilham from Manazil As-Saa'ireen, Stations of the Wayfarers, by al-Imam al-Harawi, who died in the year 481 after the hijrah of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam. Imam al-Harawi rahimahullah said in the station of Ilham, inspiration, قال الله عز وجل قال الذي عنده علم من الكتاب أنا آتيك به قبل أن يرتد إليك طرفك. Allah the Almighty has said one who had knowledge from the scripture, I will bring it to you before your glance returns to you. I will bring it to you before your glance returns to you. And this is in Surah An-Naml. Basically, what the Sheikh wanted to say here is that this person who had the knowledge of the scripture, that is related to Ilham somehow, because Ilham is basically when Allah casts in your heart some knowledge that is direct from Him, not through a medium. So it is not through the medium of the wahi, and it is not through the medium of basically intellectual inquiry. It's not al-Khabar As-Sadiq, because how do people acquire knowledge? People acquire knowledge by the sound intellect, their senses, and the Khabar As-Sadiq, which is the truthful news, like report, narration, hearing something truthful from someone who is trustworthy. That is how people acquire knowledge. So there are other verses in the Quran that would have been clearer, but also you have noticed that Imam al-Harawi sometimes wants to be subtle, and sometimes, and particularly in some of the chapters that we will cover inshallah, and that is not to detract from the status of Imam al-Harawi whatsoever, but basically state a fact that mysticism sometimes does not serve the purpose of Sufism. Mysticism sometimes does not serve the purpose of purification, because when things become too subtle, too ambiguous, then they start to lose their effect on the hearts. Sometimes a little bit of subtlety will encourage us to contemplate, reflect, will encourage us to use our intellect and the insight of our hearts to discover the hidden meanings. But certainly too much subtlety or mysticism does not serve the purpose quite well. So Imam al-Qayyim rahimahullah in Madaarij As-Saalikeen, what he attempted to do is that he attempted to reconcile between the knowledge of the exterior and the knowledge of the interior, and to remove the mysticism, keep the Sufism without the mysticism, and that is certainly and that's certainly important for us. And he was certainly successful at it. Rahimahum Allah jami'an. So anyway, the Sheikh here wants to say that the one who had knowledge of the scripture is one who had something that is of the category of Illham. Because like we said, Illham is knowledge that comes to you directly from Allah, not through the medium of al-Wahy, and not through intellectual inquiry, and also it is not through your senses. And we will come back and talk about the definition of Illham, and we will, and later, inshallah, we will talk about the place of Illham and the proof value of Illham and what the scholars had said about this particular issue. But after we finish Imam al-Harawi's explanation here. He started by the definition as usual, and then he will classify it into three different levels. He said that Illham maqam al-muhaddithin. Illham is the station of the muhaddithin. وهو فوق الفراسة, and it is above the station of firasa, which is astuteness, and we talked about al-firasa before, and we will do some disambiguation here. لأن الفراسة ربما وقعت نادرة أو استصعبت على صاحبها وقتا واستعصت عليه. Because firasa may take place infrequently, and at times it may be unattainable, whereas Illham, والإلهام لا يكون إلا في مقام عتيد, whereas Illham can only be had in a lofty station of steadiness. You don't get Illham unless you are steady in your station. You are in a steady station, lofty, steady station. Okay, so the Sheikh says Al-Ilham maqam al-muhaddithin. Al-Ilham is the station of al-muhaddithin. What is al-muhaddithin? What is hadith? Narration, story, statement, speech. So what is muhaddith? Muhaddith is the active voice, is the one who speaks. Muhaddath versus muhaddith. Muhaddath is the one who is spoken to. That's the passive voice. So if you're the speaker, you are muhaddith. If you are spoken to, you are muhaddath. So he says, Illham maqam al-muhaddithin. Illham is the station of al-muhaddithin. And al-muhaddithin has actually been mentioned by the Prophet ﷺ in a hadith where he said, in a hadith reported by Aisha radiallahu anha, she reported from the Prophet ﷺ, إنه كان في الأمم قبلكم محدثون فإن يكن في هذه الأمة فإن عمر بن الخطاب منهم. There had been in the nations before you muhaddathun. If you translate this literally, it would be people who are spoken to. People who are spoken to. If there were any one of this ummah that will be spoken to, that will be among those who are spoken to, that would be Umar, or Umar would be one of them. Umar would be one of them. Umar ibn Khattab radiallahu anhu would be one of them. So Umar certainly was a muhaddith, a mulham. The narrators of the hadith, they interpreted muhaddith here to be mulham. But muhaddith is, Sheikh here makes them the same thing, mulham and muhaddith. He said that Illham maqam al-muhaddithin, Illham is the station of muhaddithin. However, Ibn al-Qayyim argues, and likely he's correct, that muhaddith is basically a special ranking among the mulhameen. The muhaddith would be the highest, of the mulhameen. Would be only next to the prophets and messengers. So after wahi, there is al-muhaddith. After the muha ilayhi, the person who receives al-wahi, the clear manifest wahi from Allah, revelation from Allah, which would be a prophet or a messenger. Then next to this would be the muhaddith, like Umar radiallahu anhu. And Illham would be basically much more general than this. So hadith is a type of Illham. So to be a muhaddith is a category of mulham, but it is not synonymous. They don't completely overlap. They just overlap at the top of that spectrum of Illham, or the scope of Illham. The muhaddith would be the highest. That's clear, right? The concept of Illham itself, if we let's try to define Illham so that we can do the disambiguation afterwards. So what would be the definition of Illham? They had many definitions of Illham. But one of the best definitions is a definition that was mentioned by Sheikh Muhammad al-Amin al-Shanqiti in his book Adwa al-Bayan, which is a great tafsir book in which he interprets the Quran by the Quran. So in his book Adwa al-Bayan, al-Sheikh says Illham is إيقاع شيء في القلب يثلج له الصدر من غير استدلال بوحي أو نظر في حجة عقلية يختص الله به من يشاء من عباده. Okay, so let us break this down. إيقاع شيء في القلب, casting something in the heart. يثلج له الصدر, by which the chest feels at ease or feels comfort, brings about ease or comfort to the chest. So إيقاع شيء في القلب, casting something in the heart that makes the chest feels at ease or makes the heart feels at ease, brings about ease, brings about comfort. يثلج له الصدر من غير استدلال بوحي, without textual proof, without a proof from the revelation. أو نظر في حجة عقلية, or intellectual inquiry. So it's something that you felt. You feel something in your heart about a particular thing or a particular event or a particular person. Something that you feel in your heart. That is without basically textual proof and without intellectual inquiry. يختص الله به من يشاء من عباده, with which Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, or Allah grants to whomever He pleases of His servants. Allah grants to whomever He pleases of His servants. And that is the definition of the special Illham that the Shaykh wants to talk about. Not Illham in general. Because Illham in general could even apply to animals. وَأَوْحَى رَبُّكَ إِلَى النَّحْلِ أَنِ اتَّخِذِي مِنَ الْجِبَالِ بُيُوتًا وَمِنَ الشَّجَرِ وَمِمَّا يَعْرِشُونَ. And your Lord inspired al-Nahl, the bees, basically to make dwellings, or to have dwellings in the mountains and the trees and whatever humans set up, to the end of the ayat in Surah al-Nahl. And Illham also could apply to all mukallafeen, to all human beings who are liable, or to all beings who are liable. وَنَفْسٍ وَمَا سَوَّاهَا فَأَلْهَمَهَا فُجُورَهَا وَتَقْوَاهَا وَنَفْسٍ وَمَا سَوَّاهَا فَأَلْهَمَهَا فُجُورَهَا وَتَقْوَاهَا in Surah Al-Shams. So He inspired it with its piety and wickedness, or inclination towards piety and inclination towards wickedness. So certainly that type of Illham is not what the Shaykh is talking about. The Shaykh is talking about the Illham that the Sheikh Al-Shanqiti defined in Adwa al-Bayan to be something with which that Allah grants to whomever, to the select servants of His, that He wants to guide their hearts. So people who are deserving of that guidance of the heart are the ones who will get that type of Illham. So it's a special type of Illham. It is not Illham as in the linguistic definition of the word, or not the general Illham where Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala inspires every species of their functions, their roles, what they were created for. That is the Illham of the birds, for instance. Do you see how the birds fly thousands of miles, and every year back and forth, and they get back to the same place. What is this? I mean, this is, whatever GPS you have is certainly inferior to theirs. And that is Ilham. That is Allah inspired them, to do this. That's Allah inspiring them to do that. Okay. But so then we do understand what the Sheikh means by Ilham. It's not that general Ilham, it's a special type of Ilham. He makes it equal to maqam al-tahdith, or to the station of being a muhaddith or spoken to. And Ibn al-Qayyim says that they overlap, but not completely. Muhaddith is the muhaddith is at the highest level of Ilham. So what is the difference between Ilham and wahi? What is the difference between Ilham and wahi? Wahi is what? Revelation. Wahi, if you try to translate Ilham and wahi, they will both be inspiration in English. Now that's the problem. The problem is many of these things will be translated as inspiration. So we have so many, like we have al-hidayah in general, guidance in general. And then that is basically, if you say that this would be like this is guidance. And then you will have al-wahi here, which is the revelation. You have al-tahdith here, which is maqam al-muhaddithin, which is the station of Umar radiallahu anhu. And like I said, hadith would be those who are spoken to. Al-wahi would be the ultimate form of inspiration in clarity and certainty. Al-wahi is not ambiguous. Wahi is clear, manifest. Al-wahi, in wahi there is no room for error. Would there be room for error? Would Allah send a messenger and then, no room for error. So clarity and certainty at their best. Clarity and certainty. These are the two elements that set wahi apart from Ilham. Clarity and certainty. And then we have al-tahdith. Al-tahdith would be next to al-wahi in clarity and certainty. Tahdith would be next to wahi in clarity. So Umar radiallahu anhu was muhaddith, that is just right there before wahi. Not wahi whatsoever. And the line between wahi and hadith is so clear and sharp and does not allow any confusion. In fact, that Ibn Taymiyyah rahimahullah uses this basically to refute the claim of people who want to transgress the bounds of the Sharia by their ilham or their inspiration. So he says to them, if the maqam of the muhaddithin of Umar radiallahu anhu is the highest station of ilham, Umar never said حدثني قلبي عن ربي. Umar never said my heart حدثني قلبي عن ربي. Although there is room to understand this without, there is room to understand this and find excuse for someone who said this until they basically tell us what they exactly mean, and it is irreconcilable with the Sharia, with the tenets of the Sharia. حدثني قلبي عن ربي means my heart reported from my Lord. And sometimes they used to say, you report from a dead person, from another dead person, from another dead person, and we report from the one who's alive and who never dies. So you report from mayyit and we report from al-hayy alladhi la yamut. So So Ibn Taymiyyah rahimahullah, Imam Ibn Taymiyyah rahimahullah said if Umar is the highest station, he never said that. He never claimed it. In fact, when one of his scribes wanted to write, it was reported that one of his scribes wanted to write, هذا ما أرى الله أمير المؤمنين عمر. This is what Allah showed to Amir al-Mu'mineen, or manifested to Amir al-Mu'mineen, or disclosed to Amir al-Mu'mineen Umar. He said to him, erase it, right? هذا ما رأى عمر. That is what Umar thought. فإياكن صوابا فمن الله. If it is correct, it is from Allah. وإياكن خطأ فمن عمر. And if it is incorrect, it is from Umar. That's Umar. And Umar also used to always, give in to any report that came to him from the Prophet ﷺ. He used to collect the Sahaba to counsel, to consult to them. Sometimes he would listen to the younger Sahabas. Sometimes he would listen to less popular and younger Sahaba. He would listen to Abu Musa, he would listen to Abu Sa'id al-Khudri. He would listen to Sahaba that are much younger and certainly much less, knowledgeable than he was. Umar also used sometimes to make mistakes. Umar was not always right. Is that true or not? So when Umar disagreed with Abu Bakr, Umar was not always right. Sometimes Umar also, had thoughts that were counter to the Prophet's thoughts. Certainly he would, yusallim, and he would accept and submit and give in to, the Prophet's guidance, not thoughts. The Prophet's guidance. So that maqam al-tahdith did not prevent Umar from disagreeing with the Treaty of al-Hudaybiyah at the beginning. And then eventually he accepted it. Did not prevent Umar from seeing that saying, we know that you are al-Hajar, when he was talking to al-Hajar Aswad, addressing al-Hajar Aswad, he said that we know that you don't benefit or harm, but had I not seen the Prophet ﷺ kiss you, I would have not kissed you. So if Umar is at the highest level of this Illham, then no one other than Umar can compromise the wahi, can encroach on, can compromise, transgress the wahi by claiming that they have ilham or that they are receiving direct knowledge from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, and that would be heretical and absolutely unacceptable. Imam Ibn Taymiyyah rahimahullah also points out something that is pretty subtle and pretty beautiful as well. He says the Prophet ﷺ said, there had been muhaddithun in the nations before you. If there were to be any muhaddithin in this nation, if there would be any muhaddithin in this, it would be Umar. Or Umar would be one of them. Umar would be one of them. So Imam Taymiyyah says, this is the best nation. This is the best of nations. So how come they had many muhaddithin before us? And when it comes to us, the Prophet ﷺ is making it a conditional statement. If there were any, one of them would be Umar. So this nation is most deserving of an abundance of muhaddithin because it is the best nation. But he said, because it is the best nation, it does not need an abundance of muhaddithin, because the Prophet of this nation left it on al-Mahajj al-Bayda, on a clear path, not in need of not in need of guides after him. Certainly the scholars and the awliya al-Salihin and the scholars, they have their own place. They have their respected and distinguished place. But the reason why there were so many muhaddithin before is that they needed redirection often. But since our Prophet left us a detailed roadmap to guidance and success, we need less of them. We need less of that. We need less redirection, less recalibration, because the Prophet left us the Quran and the Sunnah, and they are detailed, and they have these qualities in them, that they are clear, they are detailed, and they point to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, the ultimate goal. So, but here you will have firasa, here you will have isma', here you will have ifham, and I'm not putting them in the from top to, just put them within the circle. Here you will have bayan. Here you will have, let us say, kashf, dhawq, fath. Okay, that's plenty, right? And there is more. But all of this would be basically, would share with Illham, can be all translated as Illham. So firasa, we said, is astuteness. But each one has a little bit of a distinction. So firasa is your ability to tell people apart, to tell about their interior from their exterior. To see someone walk through the door and they make a certain move or they look a certain way, and you could tell so much about who they are. And we give examples in the station of Farasa about, we give a lot of examples about this. So that is Farasa, that's astuteness. Okay, we're done with this. Now, ifham is basically to make you understand. Yafham, to understand. Ifham is to make you understand. So when Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala make you understand something, that is called ifham. And Ibn al-Qayyim puts ifham at a much higher level of hidayah than other ranks. So that is ifham. Kashf means disclosure. So the emphasis in kashf is on something that is hidden, usually hidden from eyesight, something that is hidden from others, that Allah will make open to you, manifest to you. It's kashf, disclosure, to disclose. Something that was hidden, that became disclosed to you. Dhawq is about taste. Taste. Your ability to have the right intuition, to basically have the right sense. Your ability to have right intuition, right sense about different things. Isma' is about audition, but isma' is the transitive verb here, to make you hear, to allow you to hear. It's like the signs of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala in this universe and the verses of His book speak to you. Your ability to hear is different from the fact that they are all the time speaking to you. Allah's signs in the universe are all the time speaking to you. Will you be able to hear? That's a different thing, right? So isma' is Allah granting you the ability to hear. So it particularly, but it is not just about hearing. Isma', it's not just about the physical hearing. It could be also to see. It's about perception. It is your ability to perceive lessons and ibar from the universe and from the book of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Bayan is clarification, and there is bayan am and bayan khas and so on. And fath is opening. When fath means opening, and the emphasis here in fath is about something that was difficult and became easy all of a sudden. You know, you had basically been working on this. When you say Fatah Allahu lak or Fatah Allah alayk, you could still say Fatah Allah alayk, even though some people don't like it, but it is still valid. So Fatah Allah lak or Fatah Allah alayk, like you're trying to understand the meaning of a verse, for instance, and all of a sudden, you know, you got it. That is called Fatah, opening. Something that was closed and then became open. But do you see how they're all related to Illham? They're all related to the concept of Illham. So when we use different, these are not synonymous, they're not synonyms. It's a form of polysyny, not polysyny. But it's basically, there is a degree of overlap between each one of them. But the fact that each one has a name of its own, means that there are subtle differences between them. And the difference may not necessarily be very substantive. It may be just about the perspective. So here, when it comes to Fath, it wants to emphasize that there was something difficult and all of a sudden became easy. Here, Kashf, the emphasis here on something being hidden to others and then disclosed to you. Here, Firasa, astuteness, it's about telling people apart from each other, or telling about their interior from their exterior. Zawq is about taste. You know, Isma' is about being able to perceive or hear the signs of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala when they speak to you. So this is just a disambiguation of the concept of Illham. It's a form of hidayah, it's a form of guidance. Yeah, Ibn al-Qayyim rahimahullah puts ru'ya as the last one of these, number 10 in his sort of different ranks of hidayah, which is basically the it's like a vision, like a dream, but you know, like a nightly sort of vision. And certainly ru'ya as-Sadiqa is part of this, and you may. But then we will come back and talk about the scope of this later, inshallah. So Sheikh says that Illham maqam al-muhaddithin. Illham is the station of the muhaddithin, and when we understand that the muhaddithin are basically the highest category of al-mulhamin. But al-muhaddithin are still not receiving a revelation or wahi from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Therefore, muhaddithin can never transgress, compromise the wahi by their special guidance that they receive from Allah. He said, وَهُوَ فَوْقَ الْفِرَاسَةِ, it is above the station of firasa, astuteness. And you do understand the subtle differences between Illham. Illham is more general, and there is some overlap, not necessarily over or below, but there is different emphasis in Illham and Firasa. But Illham is more general than Firasa. And then he says, لأن الفراسة ربما وقعت نادرة, because Firasa may take place infrequently and at times it may be unattainable, whereas Illham can be only had in a lofty station of steadiness. And that's because the Shaykh feels that Illham is a degree above Firasa. If Shaykh makes Illham and Tahdith pretty much synonymous, and we said that Illham is more general and Tahdith is at the highest level of Illham. Then the Shaykh said, وَهُوَ عَلَى ثَلَاثِ دَرَجَاتٍ, and it is of 3 levels. The first daraja, he said, الدرجة الأولى نبأ يقع وحيا قاطعا مقرونا بسماع أو مطلقا. He said the first level is a fact that is transmitted by means of certain inspiration, wahi, whether it is accompanied by hearing or not, Wahi happens in different ways, different forms. وما كان لبشر أن يكلمه الله إلا وحيا أو من وراء حجاب ويرسل رسولا فيوحي بإذنه ما يشاء. الوحي يأتي أحيانا على هيئة, anyway, but this is a different story. So the wahi comes in different forms. Here it says a fact that is transmitted by means of certain inspiration, wahi, whether it is accompanied by hearing or not. In the footnotes in the document that I sent you, I pointed out that in some of the manuscripts of this book, it does not say نبأ يقع وحيا. It says وهو إلهام نبي يقع وحيا, not نبأ نبي. And that basically, there is a typo somewhere because the Sheikh must have said one of the two. It's either naba or nabi. But if we say it's ilham nabi, it is an inspiration of a prophet, then everything falls in place. Because wahi is received by a prophet, the prophet, and then it is wahyan qati'an, it is certainly certain, maqrunan bisama'an or not, it is accompanied by hearing or not, and there are different levels of sama'. In this case, there is sama' directdirectly from Allah, and the two prophets that received the direct, they were spoken to directly by Allah are our Prophet ﷺ and Prophet Musa, كلم الله موسى تكليما, or sama' from the messenger of Allah, the angelical messenger of Allah. But in this case, we're still in trouble. Why? Because usually the first level, the Sheikh talks about the lowest level, and then he goes up in an ascending order, not in a descending order. And certainly, Sheikh does not mean that the wahi of the prophets is at the bottom of inspiration or the bottom of Illham. But some of the scholars say maybe he meant to switch the order right just here. Maybe his usual thing is to divide the 3 degrees or 3 levels in an ascending order from the top upwards. But maybe just here he selected to switch the order. And they tried to sort of provide different justifications for why would he do it here in the station of Illham versus other stations. But all of this, is contingent upon whether he actually said naba or nabi. And in many manuscripts it's naba. But anyway, the point is clear. If this is meant a revelation, it is clear, straightforward. If it is not, there is a lot of ambiguity here. If it is not about a revelation to a prophet, then there is some ambiguity here. And then he says, وَالدَّرَجَةُ الثَّانِيَةُ إِلْهَامُ يَقَعُ عِيَانًا وَعَلَامَةُ صِحَّتِهِ أَنَّهُ لَا يَخْرِقُ سِتْرًا وَلَا يُجَاوِزُ حَدًّا وَلَا يُخْطِئُ أَبَدًا. The second level is an inspiration that manifests in reality. The indications of its genuineness are, one, it does not tear the veils, meaning it does not tear the veils between you and a station that you are not entitled to yet, or not invited to yet. There are veils between the different stations. In your travel to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, different stations are separated. And you should not remove the veil to the next station before you get invited. Would that be appropriate? Like if you're not invited to this station, should you remove the veil? No. You wait until you get invited. Okay. It could also mean that it does not tear the veil between you and the people, between your station and the people, because people's recognition of your station could be a trial, a test for you that you may or may not succeed in. So you do not bring about this to yourself. And you continue to cover yourself and not show the public your station. And then he said it does not exceed the limit. وَلَا يُجَاوِزُ حَدًّا, and it does not exceed the limit. And it does not cause you to exceed the limit. It does not cause you to exceed the limit. So the fact that you have been, that your heart has been guided aright a few times should not make you self-conceited, should not make you arrogant, and you would not exceed your limit. وَلَا يُخْطِئُ أَبَدًا, and it never errs. الدرجة الثالثة, the third level, is an inspiration that إلهام يجلو عن التحقيق صرفا, leads decisively to the ultimate ascertainment. يجلو عن التحقيق صرفا, leads decisively to the ultimate ascertainment. The ultimate ascertainment is basically your ability to reach the station of shuhud. Shuhud is the beholding of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala without any distractions. Shuhud is the beholding of Allah without any distraction. And it is understood that this is the beholding of the heart. Your heart beholding Allah without any distraction. Or the beholding of Allah that will basically block off all the distractions. That just the beholding of Allah itself will not allow you to get distracted. You will not see any distractions. You will not see the people who are around you. And we talked about shuhud a lot. Okay, because the mashayikh that particularly talk about fana, that talk about self-annihilation, and we said self-annihilation could be the heretical one. This is the existential self-annihilation that leads to hulul wa ittihad, that leads to divine indwelling, that leads to union, and the heretical sense of union with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, not recognizing the difference between the creation and creator. But we said that fana, that is Sunni fana, is the fana of il-iradat. When your will completely conforms to the will of Allah, when you have crushed your ego enough that your will becomes in complete conformity with the will of Allah, subservient to it. As the Prophet ﷺ said, حَتَّى يَكُونَ هَوَاهُ تَبَعًا لِمَا جِئْتُ لَهُ, until their own desires. One of you will not have faith until their own, complete faith, until their own desires are in conformity with that which I brought forth. Your own desires will be in conformity with the divine will. Basically, you will only like and desire that which He wants, that which He wills. That means what? Your own irada vanished into His, was absorbed into His. And that is the fana, the Sunni fana. And then fana al-shuhud, which is the fana and perception. It is not in the absolute sense. It is not like you're not seeing the people. You are seeing the people, but they are never distracting you. So your heart, even your eyes could behold them. They're never distracting you because your heart is always with Allah. And the heart's beholding of Allah prevents it from getting distracted by the people. You're not working for them. You're not trying to appease them, although you're trying to please them for Allah. Right? But you're not after their appeasement. So that's يجلو عين التحقيق صرفا, leads decisively to the ultimate ascertainment, and that is the station of shuhud. وينطق عن عين الأزل محض, speaks clearly of pre-eternity, and pre-eternity is the focus, the emphasis in this. This is the third station, and the Sheikh's habit is to talk about fana in the third station, right? Every third station we've been covering fana, where he wants to get us there. He wants us to crush our ego enough that it does not cause us any impediment, it does not slow us down in our travel to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So here he says, وَيَنْطِقُ عَنْ عَيْنِ الْأَزَلِ مَحْضَ. Azal is what? Pre-eternity. Abad is eternity as in the future. Abad is eternity as in the future. Azal is pre-eternity or eternity as in the past. As in the past. So the first without beginning, al-azali. So here, why is there so much emphasis in the discussion of fana, emphasis on pre-eternity? Because that is when there was only Allah and there was nothing else. And they always want you, because you're going to always be seeing the people, they always want you to imagine, to throw the blanket, throw the blanket on everything around, go back 100 years. If you go back 100 years, none of anyone of us was here? No. None of us was here. So go back 200 years, 300 years, 1,000, 1 million, 2 million, 1 billion. And then at one point, certainly, the universe, that's even scientifically proven, that's what science says now, that the universe had a beginning. At one point, the universe did not exist. Whoever brought the universe to existence was there. And that's the intent here, is to go back. So if everything was contingent upon his creation and everything is in need of his maintenance, because he is the only, al-Hayy al-Qayyum in the truest sense of al-Hayy al-Qayyum, the living, the self-sufficient. Then just, if you go back to that point, that is what matters. And then you will only be observing the one who existed all the time and existed basically without any contingencies. The necessary one, not the contingent. And then وَلِلْإِلْهَامِ غَايَةٌ تَمْتَنِعُ الْإِشَارَةُ إِلَيْهَا. The Sheikh at the end, and going back to being a little bit subtle here, or he said وَلِلْإِلْهَامِ غَايَةٌ تَمْتَنِعُ الْإِشَارَةُ إِلَيْهَا, and the zenith to which Ilham leads is indescribable. Whatever I talk to you about, that is all about different phases, different steps on the way to Ilham, but the zenith is indescribable, because the zenith in the Sheikh's dictionary is ultimate self-annihilation. It is ultimate it's ultimate, vanishment. Therefore, it is indescribable, and you can only know it when you reach it. So only those who are there know what is there. And that's what the Sheikh wanted to say at the end. Okay, so I wanted to take a few minutes to talk about the place of Ilham and some examples and how to reach it. When it comes to the place of Ilham, Ilham is an issue that is usually addressed in different disciplines, and it depends on the discipline. Whatever you will learn about Ilham will be dependent on the discipline that you are studying when you're learning about Ilham. It has to do with usul al-Din, because it has to do with usul al-Din, fundamentals of the Deen, Aqidah and usul al-Din, because it has to do with guidance in general. It has to do with guidance. It has to do with Islamic thought, Islamic philosophies, sometimes called Islamic philosophy, Islamic thought, particularly the area of epistemology, because it is about acquisition of knowledge. And epistemology is the science that basically addresses the knowledge of knowledge. Science that addresses knowledge and the nature of knowledge and how we acquire it and how do we ascertain that what we know is actually true. It has to do with usul al-fiqh also, because usul al-fiqh is the science, the branch that studies the proof value of different things. Proof value of the Quran, proof value of the Sunnah, proof value of ijma', proof value of qiyas. They also want to study proof value of Ilham, because some people may say that Ilham is a source of knowledge, and if it is a source of knowledge, what is the proof value of Ilham? And now, since it is being addressed by different disciplines and scholars in different disciplines, you have to keep in mind that every scholar addresses Ilham from their own spectacles, because if you are an usuli, if you're talking about usul al-fiqh, principles of jurisprudence, then Ilham basically to you will be meaningless, because here you're talking about solid proofs. You're talking about the proof value of Ilham when it comes to what the usul al-fiqh is about, making fiqh. Haram, halal, mubah, makruh, mustahab, etc. So when it comes to rulings, the usulis will be quite opposed to it. So you will find the people who will, regardless of their orientation, the people who will be most opposed to Ilham are the usulis that talk about Ilham from an usuli perspective. You'll find the Sam'ani, for instance, Abu al-Ma'ali al-Juwayni, you'll find Abu Ya'la, you'll find Tajuddin al-Subki. Those people are completely against Ilham, or against Ilham being of value, because they're talking about it from that angle, from that perspective, because they are addressing what? Proof value of Ilham. Can Ilham basically ascertain the obligation of something or the prohibition of something? No. And that should be clear. So that's why the usulis usually may seem to put Ilham down, but that is the angle that they are coming from. Now, so if we imagine, for simplicity, that there are actually two different positions or three positions regarding Ilham, but like I told you, it is very complicated because it depends on the angle and it depends on the scope of Ilham that we're talking about. So it is not as simple as that. But if we imagine that the discourse about Ilham, not without paying attention to the angle, epistemological, usuli angle, or usul al-din angle, we're not looking at this anymore, we're not paying attention to this anymore. But if we imagine that we have different positions, we will say that some people gave Ilham too much value, some people gave Ilham no to very little value, and some people were in the middle. What else? So on the side of the people who gave Ilham no to very little value, what proofs did they use? You could say that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says in Surah Al-Saffat, for instance, أَمْ لَكُمْ سُلْطَانٌ مُبِينٌ فَأْتُوا بِكِتَابِكُمْ إِن كُنتُمْ صَادِقِينَ. Or do you have clear manifest authority? Then bring about your book if you are, or your scripture, if you're truthful. Bring about what? Your scripture if you're truthful. And if you can't bring about your scripture, if you can't bring about your book, then it doesn't matter what you say. Then Ilham in this case has room, has place or not? No place. فَأْتُوا بِكِتَابِكُمْ إِن كُنتُمْ صَادِقِينَ. Bring about your scripture, bring about your book. وقالوا لا يدخل الجنة إلا من كان هودا أو نصارى تلك أمانيهم قل هاتوا برهانكم إن كنتم صادقين. In Surah Al-Baqarah. And they said no one will enter paradise except the Jews and Christians. تلك أمانيهم. أمانيهم means what? These are their wishful thoughts. This is their wishful thinking. Say to them, هاتوا برهانكم. Bring about what? Your proof. Produce your proof. So if they can say Ilham, then what is the meaning of this challenge? Challenge does not have any meaning. If Ilham can be a proof, then that challenge does not mean anything. Because Ilham, you say, حدثني قلبي عن ربي. That's what we think, that's what we feel. But the fact that the Quran challenged them to bring about their proof means that Ilham is not a proof, on anything. You can't use Ilham to basically prove anything. Then they may also say, and there is so much that there is so much, ayat. Islam is an evidence-based religion. The emphasis on the burhan, the bayinat, the clear proofs is quite clear in the Quran. And then you may also say that when the Prophet ﷺ sent Mu'adh ibn Jabal to al-Yemen, what did he tell him? He asked him, how would you judge if something arises that needs judgment? He said, I judge by the book of Allah. And the Prophet ﷺ said to him, what if you don't find what instruction about the matter that you are seeking guidance for in the book of Allah? What would you do? He said, بِسُنَّةِ رَسُولِ اللَّهِ, by the sunnah of the Messenger of Allah. And then the Messenger ﷺ said to him, what if you don't find? neither in the book of Allah, nor in the sunnah of his messenger. What do? And Muaz said to him what? أجتهد رأيي ولا آل. I then exercise reasoning, I reason, and I don't spare any effort. Reason and don't spare any effort. So Mu'adh ibn Jabal jumped right from the sunnah to reasoning. Qiyas would be, part of this. Analogy would be part of this. So reasoning. In this case, where is Ilham? There's no Ilham here. And then the Prophet ﷺ commended Mu'adh for following this sequence. The book of Allah, sunnah of his messenger, and then I reason. But what about, so this is enough because we don't have time. This is enough for the people who oppose Ilham or oppose any proof value for Ilham. What about the people who support Ilham? What will they use? They can use, for instance, يا أيها الذين آمنوا اتقوا الله يجعل لكم فرقانا. يا أيها الذين آمنوا اتقوا الله وآمنوا برسوله يجعل لكم فرقانا. Or wait a second. It's in Surah al-Anfal. يا أيها الذين آمنوا اتقوا الله يجعل لكم فرقانا. Right away. يا أيها الذين آمنوا إن تتقوا الله يجعل لكم فرقانا ويكفر عنكم سيئاتكم. نعم. سورة الأنفال يا أيها الذين آمنوا إن تتقوا الله يجعل لكم فرقانا ويكفر عنكم سيئاتكم ويغفر لكم. إن تتقوا الله يا أيها الذين آمنوا إن تتقوا الله in Surah Al-Anfal. Oh, you believe if you fear Allah, He will give you the criterion. He will give you a criterion for this Furqan. We did not mention Furqan in the big circle. Furqan also belongs to the big circle. But Furqan, the emphasis on Furqan is what? Not simple guidance. The emphasis on Furqan is to be able to sort out misguidance, is to be able to discover where misguidance is to be able to refute a misconception, to be able to discover where the misguidance lies. That's the Furqan. So, يا أيها الذين آمنوا إن تتقوا الله يجعل لكم فرقانا. Oh, you believe if you fear Allah, He will give you a criterion by which you distinguish between right and wrong. Close to the end of Surah Al-Baqarah, وَاتَّقُوا اللَّهَ وَيُعَلِّمُكُمُ اللَّهِ. And fear Allah and Allah will teach you. Fear Allah and Allah will teach you. وَاتَّقُوا اللَّهِ. So, meaning, after you fear Allah, then Allah will teach you. So this is not simply, there is something more here than just the wahi. Someone may say, Allah is teaching us, Allah has given us a criterion, and then in Surah An-Nur, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, وَمَنْ لَمْ يَجْعَلْ لَهُ نُورًا فَمَا لَهُ مِنْ نُورٍ. And to whom Allah did not provide light, he will have no light. Or he to whom Allah did not provide light will have no light. وَمَنْ لَمْ يَجْعَلِ اللَّهُ لَهُ نُورًا فَمَا لَهُ مِنْ نُورٍ. He to whom Allah did not provide light will have no light. So that is, they use all of this to basically support that Ilham has a role. There is a role for direct teaching, direct instruction, direct guidance from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Knowledge that's cast into the heart. It's not hardcore knowledge. It's not, but we'll come back to it. And then they say also that in the hadith that is reported by Ahmad from Wabisa ibn Ma'bad radiallahu anhu, he came to the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, and in some of the reports of the hadith, before he said anything to the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, the Prophet said to him, you came to ask about such and such, al-birr wal-ism. You came to ask about righteousness and sin. And he said, yes, that's what I came to ask about. And the Prophet ﷺ told him. And then the Prophet ﷺ said to him, استفتي قلبك البر ما اطمأنت إليه النفس واطمأن إليه القلب والإثم ما حاك في النفس وتردد في الصدر وكرهت أن يطلع عليه الناس in some reports وإن أفتاك الناس وأفتوك. So the Prophet ﷺ said to him, consult your heart. استفتي قلبك. Consult your heart. البر ما اطمأنت إليه النفس. Bir is that with which the nafs finds comfort. The nafs finds comfort in righteousness. To some extent, but this is certainly, the Neoplatonic philosophy, privation, and the default is goodness, and to some extent, but certainly there are major differences between the Islamic theory on this and the Neoplatonic one. But to some extent, the default is bir. And the nafs, the human soul, will find comfort, serenity, tranquility in bir, in righteousness, in good, in the good. مطمئنة إليه النفس وطمئنة إليه القلب. So the heart is not, there is no tension. There is ease. There is comfort, because it is the default. البر مطمئنة إليه القلب. والإثم ما حاك في النفس وتردد في السرد. Ithm is what basically causes friction and quivers in your chest and makes you uncomfortable, makes you a little bit agitated. If you're doing something wrong, you could even see this, like if you give food to a cat, she will stay around and eat it in peace. If the cat snatches the food away, she will not be comfortable. She will run away. She will eat it quick. There is something she feels, or he or feels that there is something wrong about this. The same applies to human beings. And then the Prophet ﷺ said, regardless how repeatedly they give you fatwas, so consult your heart, regardless how repeatedly they give you fatwas. They say, well, this is Illham, consult your heart, knowledge of the heart. Is it clear? It's clear that there is something here more than the knowledge that is received by transmission, more than al-naql, the knowledge that is received by transmission. Because ulama as-su, evil scholars have all that knowledge in their mind. But it doesn't benefit them, because the heart does not have the necessary qualities to make use of this knowledge. So, in this case, how do we understand this hadith? Well, certainly some of the scholars, Imam al-Ghazali, for instance, said that this hadith applies to mubahat only, not haram. So if the mufti tells you this is mubah, then you consult your heart. If the mufti tells you this is haram, you don't consult your heart. Ibn Rajab, rahimahullah, and Ibn Rajab takes a more moderate position here, rahimahullah, Imam Ibn Rajab. He said, this is when there is equivocation. This is when there is basically shubha. There is no way for you to decide. The muftis disagreed. The evidence that is on both sides is equal in your eyes. Then consult your heart. But that is not when you have clear evidence, or that is not when the muftis agree, or that is not when the most distinguished and most knowledgeable muftis agree. That is not where the scope, the hadith applies. So, given all of this, what would be the place of Illham? Does it have a place? It has a place, but these are the four things that you want to really remember when it comes to Illham, when it comes to the distinguished, lofty place of Illham. And I will tell you why I am saying it has a distinguished, lofty place. If you keep those four conditions in mind, then inshallah you will be safe. One, Illham is inferior to the wahi, and inferior in clarity, inferior in certainty, inferior in proof value. Illham can never basically compete with wahi in any way, shape, or form. Any Illham that comes to you that is in conflict with the wahi is ilham from the shaitan, not from al-Rahman. Okay, so that's the first one. The second one is ilham is subjective. Ilham is subjective. And in this case, because it is subjective, like Abu Zayd al-Dubusi, one of the great Hanafi imams, he said, وَأَمَّا مَقَامُ الْفِرَاسَةِ فَلَا نُنْكِرُهُ أَبَدًا ولكن as for the station of firasa, we don't deny this. ولكن لا نقول بأن شهود القلب حجة, or whatever he said, something of that nature. But we do not accept the testimony of the heart as a proof, because we do not know whether you received this from Allah or a shaitan or yourself. This is your wishful thinking. And people sometimes, oftentimes people want to believe themselves, want to believe certain things, and then when you want to believe something, you will imagine that this is coming from the malak, from the angel, or it's coming from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So that it is subjective. Number 3, so the first one, inferior to wahi. The second one, it is subjective. The third one, which is a consequence of the subjectivity and lack of certainty here. The third one is that it is exclusive, meaning it's for you. It is not binding on anyone else. Because basically, if you say that this is something to be propagated like a sunnah or something, or it is binding on other people, then you will, in this case, want to show us some miracles like the prophets and claim that you are a prophet, and then, in Islam, the punishment of the people. But anyway, so if you're not going to claim that you are a prophet, then certainly no one is bound by your ilham. No one is bound by your ilham. But can other people benefit from it? Yes, we will say yes. But we will say, when we talk about the scope of ilham and some examples. So the final point is that it has a limited scope. It has a limited scope. There is no ilham in rulings, in haram and wajib, and there is no ilham in these rulings. So it has a limited scope. There could be some benefits, So what's the scope of ilham? And then instead of talking about it from a theoretical perspective, we'll just give some examples on the scope of ilham. Mubahat in general is the scope of ilham. Things that are permissible in general is the scope of ilham. Choose this career versus that career, this job versus that job, this spouse versus that spouse. These are all mubahat. Fly this airline versus that, or fly today versus not fly today. And then something could be cast into your heart that makes you feel, this does not feel right. I just don't feel right about this marriage, for instance. So this is the sphere of mubahat. The sphere of mubahat. And then, what about religious matters? Didn't the Prophet say, "Istafti qalbak," consult your heart? Yes, he said. So ilham has room here? Yes, it does. It's an extra layer of guidance that will allow you in cases of ambiguity, in circumstances where things are ambiguous, unclear. It will help you. That guidance of the heart will help you when things are not ambiguous. Not when it is clear, what Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala and His messenger commanded or prohibited. So it does have room here. Also, it has room when it comes to the religion in al-ifham, in fahm, in understanding, right? when they say that he had fath min Allah, fath means opening. Allah fatah alayh. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala opened it for him. When one sheikh, for instance, reads a verse, or one sheikh interprets a verse and extracts like 15 different benefits from that verse, whereas people behind them, people other than him or before him, they are only able to extract 4 or 5 benefits, and he is able to add more benefits, and they all make sense. You know, when we said that if you read this hadith where the Prophet ﷺ said there used to be muhaddithun in the ummah before you, and if there were to be any muhaddithun in this ummah, Umar ibn Khattab would be one of them. Would you be able to tell? Would you be able to say that this, you know, like Imam Taymiyyah rahimahullah, he was able to say, he examined the hadith and he looked at it and he said, this ummah is the best ummah. How come they had so many and we had little? And to come up with that, you know, listen, that the reason why we don't need that many muhaddithin is that our Prophet ﷺ left us on a clear path. That is basically like a deeper reading of the hadith or understanding of the hadith. Maybe you and I would read this hadith so many times and don't stop there and don't pause or don't get the ilham to have this understanding, right? Okay, so that's another one. And then finally, which is the area that some people find a little bit discomfort in. Finally, someone could have ilham that something in, you know, some verses or some particular acts provide some help or some relief. Like, for instance, we will talk about sakina, and the next station will be the station of sakina. And Imam al-Qayyim in the station of sakina says that Imam Taymiyyah used to read, there are about 7 verses that mention sakina in the Quran. Wherever he used to feel tense or to be stressed out, he would read the verses of sakina. And he advised me of that, and I tried them, and I find them to work all the time. You know, you read the verses of sakina, and then you will have sakina. You need the verses that mention sakina, and you'll have sakina. Well, you could say, does this really come from the Prophet? But it doesn't have to. You know, there is basically more flexibility in the area of ruqa, dua, zikr. There is more flexibility here. Do you have to take it from him? No, you don't have to take. Is it binding on anyone? No, it is not binding on anyone. But if a good scholar told you that I have been reading those verses and they bring about peace to my heart, if you want to try them, try them. If you do not, don't. But oftentimes, if you don't, you will miss out. You know? Anyway, but that is also part of the scope of Illham. How do we get there? And I know that we took a lot more, but because this is one of the most basically controversial issues, and this is also the proper understanding of this concept is the distinction between true and false Sufism. It is the distinction between orthodox and deviant Sufism, the proper understanding of this concept. So, how do we get there? And I told you that it is addressed sometimes from the legal theory perspective, the epistemological perspective, the usul al-din perspective, different perspectives. And the tazkiyah perspective, certainly, which is the purification perspective. Some of the scholars, when they address it, because they have a particular emphasis, they address it from their angle. But here, you know, and certainly I love the epistemology of Imam Taymiyyah rahimahullah, and he moves seamlessly between disciplines. So in Dar' Ta'arud al-Naql al-Aql wal-Naql, which is a book that is about refutation of contradiction between reason and revelation, a book that you may expect to be dry. It's about theory, it's more intellectually oriented, but he gives us like a paragraph about the way to Illham, that is so beautiful. So I will read it because it is so beautiful. I'll read it all in Arabic and then I'll read it in English. So he says, فكلما استعمل العبد عقله وعمل بعلمه وأخلص في عمله وصفى ضميره وجال بفهمه في بصيرة العقل وذكاء النفس وفطنة الروح وذهن القلب وقوى يقينه ونفى شكه وضبط حواسه بالآداب النبوية وقام على خواطره بالمراقبة وتحرى ترك الكذب في الأقوال والأفعال وصار الصدق وطنه وذهب عنه الرياء والعجب وأظهر الفقر والفاقة إلى معبوده وتبرأ من حوله وقوته ولزم الخدمة وقام بحرمة الأدب وحفظ الحدود والاتباع وهرب من الابتداع زيد في معرفته وقويت بصيرته وكوشف بما غاب عن الأعيان وصار من أهل الزيادة بحقيقة مادة الشكر الموجبة للمزيد. He said, the more a servant employs their intellect and acts upon their knowledge and purifies their actions through complete devotion, and their conscience becomes purer, and they reflect with the sight of the intellect, the intelligence of the soul, and the acumen of the heart, and grow their certainty and abolish their doubts, and tame their senses with the prophetic etiquettes, and rein their thoughts with watchfulness of the divine, and avoid lying in speech and action until truthfulness becomes their hometown, from which ostentation and conceitedness are expelled, and show need and brokenness before their Lord, and disavow their influence and power, and commit to service of their Lord, and observe the sanctity of proper etiquettes, and watch the bounds, and adhere to the Sunnah, and run away from innovation, their recognition will be elevated, and their insight will be sharpened, and things hidden from the sights will be disclosed to them, and they become of the people of lofty rankings by virtue of their gratitude that results in increase and abundance. That is in his book, The Refutation of Contradiction of Reason and Revelation. So that is part of the reason why we need to take the middle position, because some people may say if Illham brings about all of this evil and people can start to compromise the Sharia and people can become like sort of rebellious and so misguided, because it did result, and it does result, exaggeration in the place of Illham does result in so much deviation. Why don't we just block the means to evil and say that there is no proof value, there is no value, just follow the Quran and the Sunnah? There's three reasons. Why? One is that there is a long way to it, and that is what we just read now. That is the way to it. There is a long way, so we have to start early if we want to get there. The second is that we value the truth. Truth is important. So if Illham does have a place, then we can't just say that it doesn't have a place so that it does not get abused. And the third reason why it is important to give Illham its due right is that we have to have a balanced understanding of the different positions of the different scholars, so that you don't have this partisanship that will result in aversion and aversion from certain scholars, because you can hear like a scholar talking about Illham and so on, and your position is so radical, about it, then certainly you will develop aversion to that scholar. But if your division is moderate, you will be able to see where they're coming from, particularly if they are still within mainstream Islam. Even though mainstream Islam itself does have some flexibility and allow for some differences. قولوا قولي هذا أستغفر الله لي ولكم سبحانك اللهم وبحمدك أشهد أن لا إله إلا أنت أستغفرك وأتوب إليك. And we will only have 5 minutes because we need to come back and do whatever is left of the chapter of usury.